On the call, if you want to just share a little bit about yourself, maybe where you are, where you work, what you do, we'd love to hear from you in the chat. As we get ready for today's Power Hour with Christen and Hope, we've got a lot of good stuff lined up for you today. We'll give everybody just another minute, Andrea, and then we'll get going. I see Joanna, some good faces. Haven't seen you in a while. How are you? Our friends from around. There's Erin. Dory. Hi, Dory. All right, I say we jump in and get going. I know it's top of the hour and we want to be sensitive to everyone's time. So welcome, I'm Whitney Legate. I sit on the Wi-Fi board. I'm also a co-chair for the Professional Development Committee that puts together these power hours. I also work at Mannington Commercial in the flooring industry. I oversee our commercial product divisions there, and it's great to see all of you today. I want to welcome Christen and Hope. I've got our speakers today. We'll get more into their backgrounds and talk to them more during today's session. So looking forward to that. Really quickly, a couple housekeeping things. We'd love to hear from you. If you want to introduce yourself on the chat or ask any questions as we go through, we'll do a Q&A at the end, but certainly we'll go back through the chat and happy to answer anything. So for those of you who may be relatively new to Women in Flooring, it's an organization that started in 2021, really to just work on professional development and build organization for women in the flooring industry across the org. And it's been certainly a pleasure of mine to be a part of it, and we're glad to have you all today. This is our board of directors. We've got a really diverse group of women from around the industry, from press to manufacturers to suppliers to dealers to installation experts and everything in between. As I mentioned, our professional development committee, we've got a couple of the ladies on the call today, Andrea and Joanna, and I saw Crosby jump on. It's good to see everybody. All of us get together and work on programs for you throughout the year. All of this is free for anyone who'd like to join. In particular, we work on the power hours as well as the mentor program, which we are particularly proud of. But we couldn't do any of this without our wonderful sponsors. So thank you to all of our sponsors. Small or large, every donation helps and allows us to bring more and more content to all of you. I mentioned the mentor program. We love this program. It's been a great success. We continue to see it grow. If you haven't been a part of it, we'd love for you to be a part. We just opened the next cohort that will start in February. We are taking applications starting now, and then we'll begin next spring. Wanted to let everybody get through the holidays and show season before we kicked off the mentor program. So you can register on our website. So please check that out, or more importantly, pass it along to people in your network who you think could benefit from being a mentor or a mentee. We also have a great scholarship fund that a lot of people don't know about, so we're going to rely on you to help us get the word out. But we're doing both continuing ed and post-secondary education scholarships at $1,000 to $5,000 per year. So we do this 2 times a year. We've had some great winners, and we want to continue to support that, and we continue to grow that fund as well. So help us spread the word. Those open early next year for the 2025 scholarship program. We have, speaking of networking, we love to get together as a group all over the country. If you have an event that you go to, please share that with us. You can reach out to any board member. Andrea Blackburn, who's on the call, is a great connection point to pass that information along. But we love to get all together at various events. We've got a couple gatherings coming up if you want to mark your calendar. If you're going to the Mohawk Edge Summit event in Denver, the FCI annual convention, the Southwest Flooring Market in Dallas, we're doing a meetup there. And then we also have two great events at Tice this year. If you're in Vegas in January, we're doing the Wi-Fi necklaces and net zero, as well as Women Who Floor the World. I'll be at both of those and look forward to seeing hopefully many of you there as well. I know we're going through this quickly, these are all on the womeninflooring.org website as well, and you can stay up to date with all of our current events. Speaking of the website, here we have it. We also wanted to highlight for you where you can find this Power Hour and all of the Power Hours that have been recorded previous to this one on the website under Get Involved. Lots of good info. So on to today's topic, beyond the handshake. I have two wonderful women with me today, Christen Sindone and Hope Harris. I want to take a moment and just introduce both of them to you. Christen, you join us. You are the founder and managing director of Hill & Company, a talent advisory firm. Christen is an expert at connecting people across organizations and industries, so we recruited her for today's call. She's got a long career in recruiting, started in Philadelphia, moved to a company in Chicago, started kind of on the executive recruitment search based in Atlanta, Georgia. She received promotions and became an officer with that company. And then after 12 years, decided to make the hard but strategic decision to go out on her own, which is always impressive, and I have so much respect for people who do that. I don't think I have the guts to do it, but has proven so successful for you, Christen, launching Hill & Company to provide just a stronger, more advisory approach to talent management, which I know you're passionate about. Christen holds a Bachelor in Arts in English from Furman University and lives in Atlanta with her husband and 3 children. She also is deeply involved in her community and mission work, reflecting her commitment to build strong relationships across the communities in which she participates in. So Christen, welcome to the call. We're so glad to have you today, and thank you for helping us be experts on more than just networking, right?
Well, thanks. Thank you. I'm so excited to be with all of you guys, and thanks for the invitation and thanks for the introduction. That was amazing.
Absolutely. We also have Hope Harris, a flooring industry veteran with more than 15 years of experience being an HR leader. Hope is the VP of Human Resources at Real Floors, also based in Atlanta. Hope, you've got just an amazing history of cultivating connections across organizations, fueling your success and success in your organizations that you help manage. With your HR is a whole beast unto itself. I have a lot of respect for HR. You guys fix a lot of problems. But you're known for your strategic and people-focused approach, which I think is what makes a true HR professional stand out in their field. A proven track record of fostering collaboration on all levels, which I think is important. Your expertise in scaling business and building trusted relationships aligns perfectly with today's networking discussion. So we wanted Hope as another expert in this area to kind of share her insights from both an HR perspective, an industry perspective, and then you've done a lot, globally, domestically, you've got a wealth of knowledge. And then outside your professional role, you also volunteer. You share a lot of your business insights. You do a lot of mentoring. So we're very excited to have Hope with us today and appreciate your time as well. So welcome.
Thank you so much. And I'm excited to be here. Appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah. So we'll jump in. When we talk about Power Hours, we kind of keep a list of topics and we do surveys. And I think even very personally to me, and one of the reasons I joined Wi-Fi was to build a network of people that I was struggling to connect with otherwise. And it has certainly served that purpose for me. But, I think a lot of our Wi-Fi members list networking as a top topic of things they want to do better or learn how to do better. So just want to kind of hear from each of you as we dive into this topic today. Why is networking important? And Christen, I'll start with you, a proclaimed non-traditional networker, and I'll let you share a little bit about that. But why do you think networking is so important?
Well, I'll address the non-traditional part because that's kind of an interesting phrase. I think Whit and I were talking earlier about this idea that I'm not really a networker. So when she called and asked me to do this, I thought, well, it's not really kind of what I do, but where that comes from is very early in my career. I had several bosses, and I'll just tell you that they were all men, would tell me that if I wanted to be successful in this business, I had to learn to network. And I was told things like I had to go to more events, I needed to read more books. I will actually tell you that I was told that I needed to learn to play golf because I specifically was told I would never be successful outside of the golf course. Well, I am a redhead, and everything in me said, well, I'm not going to do any of those things then. And I'm going to prove that I can be successful in my own way. So that's why I always say I'm a non-traditional networker, because I think early in my career, I just resisted it because I was told it was the only way that I would be good. So for me, I had to figure out how to be successful in a very people-rich industry where building relationships really is a requirement outside of the traditional networking model. And so with that said, I'll tell you, in like specifically for me, what I found is that networking is a beautiful balance of humility and confidence. And so when you're in any type of a situation, if it's one-on-one, if it's at an event, if it's playing golf, if that's your jam, still isn't mine today, then you have to learn to be confident that you have something to offer. So, you go into that engagement with some sense of value that you have a voice, but you have to meet that with a level of humility, because at the core of networking and cultivating relationships is a give and a take. So you don't want to just take. So that is where the confidence comes in, but you also want to be willing to ask for help. And still at this point in my career, and I'm 30 years in, I approach every conversation with a level of humility that I have something to learn. And I'm constantly asking, how can I help? But also, how can this individual help me? So I think for me, over a few decades, I've learned the balance of confidence and humility and kind of the art of networking.
I love that. That's so well said. It's interesting you mentioned that balance, that give and take. I think sometimes people think networking is sort of, I need to meet this person to get X, right? And we've talked a lot about that. Hope, why do you believe networking is so important?
Yeah, I mean, for so many of the reasons that Kristen just said, I mean, when she talked about that balance between confidence and humility, I remember being told at one point, like you go into a room from like a imposter syndrome standpoint or something like that, right? And you have to remember that you do add value to any room. And I remember being told one day, remember that you got invited to that room, right? And so leverage that from a confidence standpoint. And me, for overall, the networking is, to me, it's one of the most rewarding parts about what we do. I mean, you get to encourage others, pour into others. I mean, going into the room innately, like you said, you are asking for something. It's a give and take. And I would say innately too, it's not something that was easy for me. I'm always like, I got it, right? And so you step into these rooms knowing that it's a give and take and that you're going to be asking for help. But when you can actually start to see what transpires from that and being able to pour into others through networking, to me, that's why it's so important. Another thing is too, it wasn't always easy for me. I think people think just because I'm an extrovert and that I can pretty much step into a room and speak to anyone, that did not innately come to me. And I will say it took me time. It is still something that I work on, despite being an extrovert. I initially struggled with opening up to people and moving past kind of surface level interactions and kind of really understanding, what that growth and opportunity looks like, not just for me, myself, but others in the room. And so to me, that's, I mean, the main importance of networking in that space.
Yeah, we'll just do a quick crowdsource. We'll do a little interactive. If you can do a reaction or if you want to, who knows that person in their life that networking is their superpower? I mean, they can work a room better than anybody else. They love it. They're happy. They just are so good at that. And I would say that's maybe 10% of the population. But it is some people's superpower. And then there's sort of the rest of us, is what it often feels like. And sometimes I think we think of networking as a personality trait, like I am a networker, I'm good at that, but it really is a skill, I think, that you have to work, like public speaking. You have to practice it and work on it and refine it. And if you don't do it for a while, you kind of got to go back to the toolbox and remember how to do it well. So I think you mentioned extrovert hope. We're gonna get into that topic in a little bit. Introvert, extrovert, how do you network maybe differently? But I think for those of us who it's not their superpower is really sort of how do we leverage all this? So thinking about those tools, let's talk a little bit about digital tools and social media. Big presence in many people's lives. We hear a lot about personal branding. I sometimes go to conferences and then I have the list and it's like, I'll connect with all these people. And sometimes it can be really difficult to make that meaningful or impactful. So I hope in some of our conversations you shared with me as Christen is the non-traditional networker, you are the non-traditional social media user. It's not a big part of your personal brand.
Yeah, so believe it or not, I'm going to age myself a little bit here. I have managed to survive with no Facebook, no Instagram, never had a MySpace, all of those things. Recent confession, I will scroll on TikTok. I have done that. So no posting
She's been
there.
converted.
Yes, I have. I caved. I caved. But I will say LinkedIn is something that I have consistently leveraged since, college. When it initially came out, I had a professor very early on in college that, kind of drilled into us, just understand that your social media profile is going to follow you everywhere, right? And so I think that stuck with me in life, but I think it's also something too, and I'm not shying anyone away from it, but I think just the power of it needs to be recognized in that space. For me, to be honest, it goes back, like I said before, about building meaningful connections. And it is a struggle for me, both online and offline, to really understand that space and to really fully trust folks in it. I will say for me, it's not about trying to be everywhere or having all of the most connections on social media and the most followings and all of that stuff. To me, it's really about building authentic, connections through individuals. Your following doesn't have to be massive, and you'd be amazed at how your authentic connections kind of crawl for you, and then they crawl about you, meaning that you can also pour into others through those connections. So I don't want people to think they have to have this huge social media following to be effective at networking and communicating. But I do think it is important, though, like with your LinkedIn profiles and things like that, to keep things professional, to make sure that you're keeping things up to date. One of the things that I've realized, and I don't get time to do enough of it, is, writing and responding to people's articles and things like that, because to others, they feel great about it. People are taking the time to do these things on social media, and your responses are very meaningful to them. And that's networking. That is a connection. Another thing that's very valuable to me, and I'm not going to say his name, but I have a current leader who literally responds back to every vendor, every salesperson, every email that comes over that most people would filter out, put in the trash, and put to junk. But he literally makes it his intentional intent to respond back, because all of us are trying to do a job. All of us feel that our work is important, right? A lot of us are passionate and have purpose behind what we're doing. And so even taking that little bit of time out of your day to respond back to folks that some necessarily wouldn't respond to, or like that LinkedIn connection that reached out, even if you're not in the market for a job, right? Connect with that recruiter, pass them along, connect them to someone else in your network. I always say I just kind of bucket a little bit of time out of my day in the morning to kind of just do some pass alongs for folks. And like I said, from a networking perspective, for me, the greatest thing that I could ever see is something come to fruition for another, because I've been poured into in that same space. So again, if you're not naturally drawn to social media, or even if you are, I think you could have a ton of followings and it be so surface level, right? And so just really finding that balance between meaningful impact and authenticity in your connections is important. And again, something I work on every day. So.
Listen, what's your experience with social media and your, oh, I'm getting reverb. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
What's your experience, as an industry of a heavy social media presence in the industry you're in? How do you see success in leveraging digital tools through networking and building relationships?
Well, I definitely agree with everything Hope said. And I use social media, the Facebook and Instagram, from a personal standpoint. It's usually where you'll find pictures of my kids. But I use LinkedIn professionally. I will tell you, this is probably not a news flash, but as a recruiter, we do look at all of it. So I will tell you that if you are speaking on a panel or attending an event or interviewing for a job, and there is a recruiter involved, we are finding you on Instagram and Facebook. And so I do tell everybody that your personal brand does matter. Just be intentional about it. Know what you want your brand to be and make sure that you're putting that brand out, because people are figuring out kind of who you are and what you stand for and all of those things based on these platforms. But for me, as far as what do I use, the most I use is LinkedIn. It is the number one way recruiters find talent. And the things that I'll say is, and Hope mentioned it, but I cannot preach enough, keep it current, make sure you have a picture. I have clients who literally, if I present a candidate and the individual doesn't have a photograph, I have certain clients that won't even entertain the candidate. I mean, it's the craziest thing. It's because they want to know that the individuals are current and relevant and are, willing to make those types of connections through that platform. We look at things like what articles do they repost. I mean, we do track all of these things. So everything Hope said as an executive, I can tell you as a recruiter, it's all very true. If you speak or if you attend events and somebody tags you, then that pops up. So you may not be tagging yourself at events, but I, as a recruiter, can see that somebody tagged you at that event, and then that gives me access to your profile. So you may think, well, I don't really use LinkedIn. I don't care if it's current, but if other people are tagging you, it's still, hitting people's eyes. So LinkedIn is definitely an important tool that I would certainly encourage you to use and just keep current.
Yeah, that's great advice. I'd love to hear from our audience too, just if you want to put in the chat, like what you have found most successful in networking. Is it, personally, I almost never ask someone to connect without writing a message to them, letting them know like, hey, it was great to see you at so-and-so event, or, I'd love to connect next time we're at so-and-so together. Just honestly, I use it for myself on LinkedIn because I can't remember where I met this person, but if I message them, I can go back and look and go, oh, I met them in Vegas at services 2 years ago, or because people that make a lot of sense in the moment, in 6 months I may not have seen again, or so I always like to do that. But I'd love to hear from people on the call. Put it in the chat, just what is successful for you in the social media space. And Christen, I have one more. This is a selfish question. I'm just sort of curious from a recruiter's perspective. If someone doesn't have a social media presence, like maybe they have LinkedIn but nothing else, is that a negative? Does it matter? A positive? What's your
Well, I mean, honestly, I would say that it's a little bit of a generation thing. I mean, as a recruiter, most of the people that I work with are probably they're in management positions or above. And I would say it's 50-50 if we're able to find those individuals in other platforms. If I'm working with individuals that are, say, 10 years out of college or less, 100% of the time, they have some kind of a presence. So it is a little bit of a generation thing. I would say that there is no negative opinion if somebody doesn't have a Facebook page. We don't give them a mark like, oh, they're not current or they're not, digitally savvy. But it definitely does. I mean, people that are there's also a discipline thing, right? So people that are in marketing or branding or communication, naturally, those people usually are there. People that are in operations or engineers, they may not. So, I mean, we can usually tell pretty fast what a person's brand is.
Interesting. I want to talk a little bit about as we go through kind of connecting and networking across industries, right? Like some and genres, like into the marketing and engineering and all that, how important your network is there. But let's talk about building long-term relationships, beyond transactions. I think a lot of people, we go to an event, we meet someone, and then how do you really leverage that and build a network that's meaningful? Christen, I'm going to come back to you. In our conversations, you've talked a lot about networking versus mentoring and what that's meant to you. How does that translate into this idea around building long-term real networks of people that you actually, like you said, balance, give and take with?
Sorry, is that to me or was that to
Yes, that's
Hope?
to
Sorry.
Kristen. Sorry, that's to
Okay.
Kristen.
Well, I mean, for me, again, anybody that ever has any time with me, you'll learn really fast that I guess my personal brand that I've developed over the years is that just so I have 3 children. And Whit mentioned that I had a moment in my career that I made the decision to leave firm life to start my own business. And without going into a long story, I'll tell you a huge piece of that was when I wanted to work with a specific client in a more consultative manner. The second is because I wanted to be the best mom that I could be and still work. So every decision that I make every day is what I do has to matter. And if it doesn't matter, then I'm not going to work. I'm just going to go be with my kids. And so for me, everything that I do, I believe that I have an opportunity to cultivate relationships and to impact people's lives. And so every encounter I have, I work to listen and to understand who is across the table from me. And if I can do something for them, if that's make a restaurant recommendation or a book recommendation or make an introduction to somebody else or open a door for them, that is my life goal. So for me, this idea of networking, which is why I say I don't really network, because if you were to Google the word networking, it is a transaction. It is about creating connections. But for me, everything that I do is about building relationships. So as far as how do you build relationships over transactions, I think what I would encourage you to do is just go into those encounters with an openness to, number one, be vulnerable, to let them see who you truly are. You know, you're not just there to get to the next, step on the rung on a ladder from a job standpoint, and that you have something possibly to give them. So like, just listen. It may be, I mean, for example, my oldest right now is a senior in high school. I'm talking to people a lot about applying to colleges. And I had coffee the other day with a very, very, very important client. And he asked about my kids. Well, long story short, he's on the board of one of the schools that my son is applying to. And I didn't know that. And he's not helping my son get in, but we began a very meaningful conversation for me that I was able to come back and translate to my son. And now I'm doing work for him. So it's so much more than the transaction for me.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Those personal topics often help. Hope, how do you approach this topic? Being in HR, you have a lot of people in your life. You manage a lot of people. You help other people with relationships. Talk to me a little bit about long-term value versus kind of immediate gain, and what are some of the successful approaches to turning these transactions into more meaningful relationships?
Yeah, I think I want to go back to agree with what Kristen said there too, because you never know. I've seen firsthand just somehow those just you think it's something that's super small, right? That turns into such a bigger and broader thing. Very similar from a college standpoint, all of those things. So never discount those small interactions that happen on a day to day and that connection there. I think for me, one of the things I've been fortunate to do is to watch and observe incredible leaders in this space. I mean, when you see leaders who truly embody the art of like building relationships and fostering those relationships and how those turn into like long-term transactions or long-term partnerships and so many things, I think it's just super valuable and important. I think a lot of times people don't necessarily notice that, but if you watch good leaders and watch how they interact and watch how they engage, it's just been something I've been super fortunate to witness, but it's also something that I've tried to embody in that space. And like I said, genuinely tell y'all it does take me. It's something that I consistently work on. But going back to what Kristen said, my most rewarding thing on a day to day is, seeing how I can pour into others and, witnessing firsthand that pouring into others is a powerful thing, even if it's a small interaction. I can say personally, even throughout my career, going back to like what Kristen said about being a mom, there was a point in my career where that long work days, not having a minute to breathe, all of those things. And I was like, if I could just change my role, find somewhere closer to home and be able to drop my daughter off at elementary school every day, but still keep running 90 miles a minute, what would that look like? And I'll never forget, somewhere along the line, I went to a leadership event and someone had my resume, they passed it along, and some lady went home, and it happened to be her husband came home that day, and he was running a business that they were looking to scale and grow. And she happened to work in HR, and she was like, there's a resume on the counter for this lady who's looking for a job. She didn't know me from Adam. Ended up working there and helping them grow and scale that business. And it was a block around the corner from my daughter's elementary school and all of the things. And so I know that's more from a personal perspective and a gain that I had there, but it's super meaningful in the space of, just you never know what those small interactions are going to get. But just keep in mind, you can be that person for another, and to see them succeed. It's been really neat to watch some of my teams just grow and go get their PhDs and their careers. I was at my daughter's school the other day, and her business development teacher walks up, and he was formerly on my HR team. And I say we as a team got his PhD, and he was rocking it out at the school and teaching, and that's what he's always wanted to do. And so when you get to see those things come to fruition, I mean, that to me is meaningful long-term relationships, not necessarily just in the context of how it supports me.
You both said something that I just want to touch on for our group here. And it's something personally, networking is not my superpower. I don't love it. I don't really want to go to, 1,000 breakfasts or events and meet everyone in the room. That's just not really my comfort level. Or it also takes a lot of energy for me. But you both talked about sort of having almost like a networking mentor, right? Like someone who is really strong in that you can learn from, and that skill. And I also think that, having just almost like a connector, you kind of alluded to that, Hope. You talked about doing things for other people. I think those of us who don't love networking, if you have the mindset, and Christen said it too, if you have the mindset of giving to others, like I'm not networking, I'm helping Andrea network, or I'm going to connect, Christen and Hope, and they're going to network. You are networking when you do that, but it feels sort of less hard, feels less intentional, or that, hey, I'm trying to connect with this person. And some of the most powerful network people that I have ever had the pleasure of being around are that. They are so good at connecting other people, and in turn are building their own network within the process. And Hope you just kind of touched on that too. I think that's a really good way for people who are intimidated by networking to think about it. Like, not how do I network? How can I help other people network? And then you just sort of are networking naturally, maybe in a more authentic way to yourself. Speaking of being authentic to yourself, all of us are introverts, extroverts. Some of us love it. Some of us don't. Some of this is a skill that we want to learn. Some of it we feel like we must learn. So let's talk a little bit about introverts and extroverts. Hope, how do you be an introvert or an extrovert? What makes that a good networker? How do you adjust your style, sort of depending on your personality type?
Yeah, so to be transparent, I won't overly speak on introverts, right? Not my superpower. I think for me, I am definitely an extrovert, but I will say it kind of goes back to what we talked about at the beginning of this. Just because you're an extrovert does not mean that you're going to show up with all the confidence in the world to enter a room and to make that a productive networking event for you and for others. And like I said, just go into that room with confidence and know that you were invited to that room and there's a purpose for you being in that room, and just own that in that space. And I know it's easier said than done. And like I said, there's always those folks that you've seen do it before. Lean on them. You talked about connectors. I had a mentor early on, especially working in male-dominated industries. I'll go ahead and call her out. Nancy Cranford, former VP at Turknick Leadership Group. I watched her network in a room with such confidence and such grace and such poise and amazement that I was like, yes, right? And so just watching her do that. And then again, she was that person who invited me into the room. I said, so try to find those folks. Even your one connection, that's your networking, right? So I think that's important. I also think that it's okay to reach out to others. I'll give you an example. Early on for me, I was always feeling like I had to go into a room with a plan, know who was in the room, know what was going to be talked about, all of the things, right? But when I started reaching out to others about that, a couple things happened. One of them was they'd prepare me to be in the room, right? And to prepare me to say, hey, these are some of the things that you can do to make this a meaningful event for you and for others. But it also got me to calm down in that space. And it also got me to say, okay, this is truly a space to just be vulnerable, be your authentic self, and just have fun. And if you walk into the room willing to have fun, you can do it in any industry. Because I'll tell you, going to like IT events and events, I mean, all over the world, you go into the room with the innate, like, hey, I'm here to help you. Let me do that and just have some fun. It'll relax you in that space, and you'll get to take a lot away from it. I think another thing is be that person for another. I have a meeting coming up in a couple weeks, and I had a person who reached out to me, and this particular person was like, hey, I have a lot of social anxiety. You invited me into this room with all these people in this meeting. What's it about? And in my head, I'm like, oh, simple. We're going to be connecting the dots. We're just going to pull some things out of your head, pull some things out of their head, and start to work on processes and efficiencies. But to that person, it was like, oh, that is terrifying, right? And so sitting down with that person in advance, getting, to know them a little bit more, giving them a little bit of insight into what to be prepared for from a networking perspective, and even giving them some nuggets on other people's personalities and communication styles. So you can be that person for another person, and you can always ask for that kind of support too.
Yeah, I think, we all underestimate sometimes we're thinking about ourselves. And again, if you kind of point that outward, thinking about others, that can really help. Kristen, for those of us who are introverts, which means we kind of get our energy and then expend it when we're spending time with other people versus extroverts who get energy from being with others. Doesn't necessarily mean if you're a talker or not, because I'm a loud talker, but I'm still an introvert. For those of us who are, how have you seen kind of effectively building mentor relationships and networking and, without kind of feeling drained as much as possible? What's your experience been with that?
So I love, and for the group, it was certainly not intentional when they invited me and Hope because we didn't know each other. But I love the fact that Hope and I are complete opposite ends of the spectrum. I am an introvert. I am a painful introvert. And I'll tell you a quick story. When I was with the firm that I was with, there were like 40 of us, and we did all the personality assessments, and they gave us back a grid that was plotted with dots to show where we all sat on the introvert versus extrovert spectrum. And 39 people sat on extrovert and one person sat on introvert. And I, at that point, was our top producer in the firm. And people voted who in the firm was the one single introvert. No one thought it was me. And when it came out, they were all like, there's no way you are the top salesperson. And I said, it doesn't matter. I love people and I love to be one-on-one and I love to help people and I love to help companies, but I do not love being in a room of people. And so I will say, again, very early in my career, I thought because I didn't have this big, boisterous personality, I was probably in the wrong profession. Like I probably need to be in a different profession, but I learned to kind of embrace and be comfortable with who I am and be okay with using my personality in a way that still proved to be very successful. To answer Whit's question, though, I do not have a magic wand on how to make an introvert not be drained. Candidly, I will tell you, I think it's always draining. I just think we as introverts, it is hard to be in a room of people and to be on. I find that I don't do big events. That's just not my forte. I'm not great there. I get very overwhelmed. But I do love a cup of coffee, and I will take a cup of coffee with anybody who asks me to. And I love that one-on-one. And kind of as Whit said, I don't necessarily need to be in a room of 100 people. I can have a cup of coffee with one, and I can introduce her to a Hope, to a person who loves to be in a room of 100. And I just think there's a place for all of our personality types. I think it's just really important to accept who you are and to use those traits versus try to become somebody else or try to become what the world tries to convince you that you need to be. Like there's something wrong with you if you can't work a room. No, there's not.
No, I love that. I think too, when we think of networking, it's walking into a trade show, right? And meeting 30 people while you're there. Or when we were talking with both Kristen and Hope kind of in preparation for this, talked about a lot of stories and different things. And I also think just my own experience with like Wi-Fi, we've talked about people who can connect you with other people, which Kristen and Hope have shared a lot about today, kind of focusing on others. But I also think when you don't want to walk into a room like Kristen's, that's not just, I don't like it. I don't want to do it. I'm not gonna like it. That's okay. But I think it's about adjusting your style and really looking for ways that you can build those meaningful relationships we've been talking about. Maybe it's joining a committee in a group or looking for a way to be an active participant, because it's amazing when you're in the group how much easier it is to go into a room and you just need to know one other person, or you meet people you just wouldn't have met otherwise. So I'd say for those introverts like myself to really look for connectors. I've said this before and I'll call her out because she doesn't mind, but Andrea, who's on the call, hi Andrea, is an amazing connector. She knows a lot of people, but she's one of those that when I think of, hey, I'm not sure who I need to connect with, but I know that if I let Andrea know what I'm looking to do or getting involved in, or hey, I'd really like to help, I'm just not sure who to connect with. She's this amazing, like, well, I'm going to connect you with Kristen. And, even on these power hours, she's a great facilitator. And so finding people like that in your life when you aren't one of them is an amazing gift to networking, because it really gives you that confidence level, like both Kristen and Hope were talking about, of having that confidence and humility of finding ways to network that you aren't walking into a room all by yourself that you don't know anybody and hey, I'm Whitney, and let's hand out business cards and just shake hands and then never see each other again. So I think looking for alternative ways, other people that is their superpower, find a friend whose superpower is that, and then have them connect you to everybody. That's a great way to network. That's not cheating. That's a life hack, right? So, but I think finding those connectors too can really, really help when you have that personality that maybe doesn't quite line up with that superpower. So, Hope, you kind of mentioned it. You gave some good advice. I just want to come back to that. So those who struggle maybe with social anxiety or just finding it difficult, you gave some advice of maybe reaching out to somebody who's in that event and kind of preemptively getting some information or asking to attend an event. Any other recommendations you'd offer on that topic?
I know this may sound a little cheesy to some, but I'm an avid reader. I love to read. And there are so many great books and little articles and things out there. And to me, it's almost like playing a game. And so I've done this not only in the space of like connecting, networking, and getting more comfortable in a room, but I do it in different meeting scenarios and situations in so many different places where there's so much great advice out there. And when you walk into a room, you can actually remain focused on what is my end goal in here, right? What are some of the tips and tricks that I could use in this room? And you're less focused on being stressed or what's happening in the room or what people are thinking of you and all of the things. And it's almost like playing I call it like a Jedi mind trick game, right? So you're sitting there and you're like, okay, if I try this, what is this? What is this? A little bit of a neuroscience approach to things. And so that's just a little trick that I do sometimes, especially when I'm in a room, and to be transparent, like, in a room full of males or in a room full of, people who are highly successful in a space that I'm not necessarily successful in, and it may not be my skill set, right? But again, I was invited to that room. And so those little things are some of the tools that I use to kind of help ease some of that anxiety, also help calm some of my I'm a fast talker, all the things. And so all those things, it's kind of like the little trick I do sometimes. So
I like that. That's a good one. Yeah, if anybody has any great books or articles they want to share, we'd love to see them in the chat. We can follow up as well. Hope if you've got any recommendations, we'd love Kristen as well. We'd love to hear from anyone who's got some good reads around that. I like that idea. Moving to our last topic and kind of coming back to this, connections into collaborative partnerships. I think networking sometimes is viewed as a quantity over quality. Kristen, you've talked a lot about more of that quality building, mentorship long term. Share with us what this collaborative partnership would look like and some guidance on how you've seen both yourself and then others achieve that in their networking.
That's a great question. And again, I think, I love the title of this conversation, Beyond the Handshake, because I think that's really where this question probably becomes super valuable. Because if you think about the word networking, if you were to, Google the word networking. It is sort of this instant connection that is intended to open a door, right? But if you step back from that and you think, I am trying to build a lifelong career or a lifelong passion, or, whatever it is that you're working towards, whatever those goals are, most of the time you'll find that the interaction, the connection doesn't pay off in the next day or week. It pays off, 10 years down the road. And so I think if you think about this idea of a partnership, turning that connection into a partnership, you'll find the return on that investment is much more vibrant. So I don't necessarily have any golden things. I'll give you just a couple of very quick examples. I was trying to think, where have I seen a more collaborative approach as of late? My husband is a head of sales for a global company. And he came home one day and he said, "Hey, babe, I need you to put this dinner date on our calendar." And it was a Wednesday night, which is super unusual for us. But he had a client whose daughter was the hostess at a restaurant in Atlanta that you cannot get into. It is one of those restaurants. And the only reason we had a reservation was because she was the hostess. And so we ended up having dinner with him and his wife. And about an hour in, those two gentlemen had an opportunity to talk business, and it resulted in a partnership versus a transaction. And the whole time I just kept thinking about how interesting it was that the only reason we were there was because of this guy's daughter. Another example is I have a client that I placed probably 30 years ago, and I actually, ages me, I had to hand deliver his letter to his house, and he was outside pushing his twin daughters in a stroller to get, because he had to sign it and I had to get it back to my client, and we didn't have all the tools to do it. Well, today he is an officer of a very large company on the West Coast. And he called me one day and he said, "Hey, my daughters are following you and they're super impressed with you. Will you have coffee with them and mentor them?" And so I'm now walking alongside of these two girls that I saw in a stroller, and they both just graduated from college, and they are precious girls. I adore them both. And we just have breakfast about once a quarter, and we just do life together with these two young girls. So it's just a very interesting thing when you think about this idea that networking has an opportunity to be so much more than a transaction.
Love that. Yeah, that's great. And this is a small industry, to be quite frank. So, people that we were kind of joking on our setup call, people that are your boss today may be, your employee later, or a customer today may be your boss later, or your boss may be a customer. I mean, it's a small industry. So I think protecting those and thinking about those in a partnership way professionally can be advantageous too. So Hope, how do you leverage the skills and expertise of others to kind of thinking about these collaborative partnerships? Being in HR, you interact with all the different groups within your own company, and then, outside your company across the industry, and I'm sure outside of this industry as well. How do you see that to really achieve some mutual goals for people that
Yeah, I
result in
think
collaborative partnership?
Sure. Yeah. Kind of going back to HR, to me, HR is a melting pot of all functions in an organization, right? So at the end of the day, I always say you landed in HR by fate or by accident. Mine was by fate. Ops, finance, all of those things are my sweet spot. I always say people are my passion. And so at the end of the day, in order for me to do my job and do it well, I can't just be siloed in my focus as it relates to networking and my understanding and my, learning just only from an HR perspective. So to me and for others, I kind of turn those networking connections into collaborative partnerships in so many different ways. One, how can I build and grow networks and relationships to better the organization as a whole is one way I look at it. So as I'm at different networking events and different places that I've been invited to, I don't just look at it solely from an HR perspective. I mean, how can this help my finance team? How can this help my IT team? How can this help our ops team? How can I help their ops, finance, and all of those teams? I'll give you an example more recently, and it's kind of a long little path that it did, but I happened to be invited to a networking event in Austin, Texas. At that event, one of the presenters and speakers really resonated with me. Ended up hiring him as my executive coach. From there, my executive coach introduced me to the venture capital arm of the Irish government. From the Irish government standpoint, we've gotten to partner with their global tech companies and helping them scale and grow. Recently went to Ireland and helped advise about 14 tech companies within a couple day time frame. But through that process, for me, from a personal growth perspective, got to witness these two amazing young entrepreneurial spirited women who just weren't scared of everything. And believe me, we were handing it to them left and right, picking their brains, all of the things. And it was so neat to watch them like, you know, just sell their business and really absorb all of the things that were being thrown at them and all of the different caveats to you know, what could come their way as they expanded globally. And to me, that was like the golden nugget, just getting to be a witness to someone's entrepreneurial spirited, very innovative. I'm technically a risk averse person at heart. And so to me, it's like a give, right? In that context, that was a collaborative partnership just from so many different perspectives. But at the end of the day, there was takeaway for them, takeaway for me. And so I always say, don't just look at the partnerships as something that's silo focused to your particular role or what you can do. You can, you know, leverage those networks and partnerships in so many different ways for your organization too.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. Ireland, that's pretty cool. That's really leveraging. That's very, very interesting. Well, I want to thank you both for sharing so much insights with us. I really enjoyed our conversations around this topic. You know, I wrote down a couple things as we were talking, just sort of in summary. You know, Christen started out with humility and confidence, having that balance. And I that really struck a chord with me. Hope, I mean, you both did, but Hope, you touched on thinking of networking, of connecting others first, I think really lowers the kind of the scariness of networking, sometimes making it a bit more accessible when you think of others first. You talked about mentoring, Christen, a lot. I think when you go into it with that mindset, it changes the dynamic of how you interact as well. So I just love that, you know, finding a connection, finding your own networking mentor. I think those are the things that really help you get to this next level, as you both have mentioned, on collaborative partnerships and such. So I want to just open it up to the group really quick. We've got a couple minutes left. Any questions or comments? We'd love to hear from anyone. By the way, thank you to Karen. She put a great thing in the chat. She said, we have an amazing private group for flooring executives that I'd love to invite everyone to join on LinkedIn. What an amazing connection opportunity. Thank you, Karen, for sharing that with us. Hopefully the group can take advantage of that. Any questions or comments that put it in the chat? You can unmute yourself if you'd like, if you want to raise your hand. I love the idea about smaller scale networking, like the cup of coffee. Yes, Crosby, I agree. Marty, would love to hear from you. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much for this today. It was just really brightened up my day, really what I needed. So the thing that really struck me, and I wrote it down in my notebook, as soon as I heard it, it just touched me, was the humility and the confidence. And I think that balance and then your explanation of it is just, yeah, that was just the biggest takeaway for me for that. So thank you for that.
I love that too. Awesome. Thanks, Marty, for sharing. Anybody else? This was very helpful. I like the idea of helping connect each other with our own network. And you've got some amazing women in this network. We'd love to see you more in the Wi-Fi group. There's great ways to get connected. Maybe it's join a committee, join the mentor group. All of us are on here. Reach out to any of us. I know we'd all like to connect. So there's people on here that you don't know. We'd love to get to know you. Hopefully this has been helpful. I'll just leave us with one thing. Again, I can't thank Christen and Hope enough for their time and willingness to do this with us. I really enjoyed the discussion. I'll ask each of you just to leave us with one thing today that you feel like, you know, whether it's in your career or just other people's career, what's the one thing you feel is most important to kind of moving beyond the handshake? And Christen, I'll start with you.
Oh, goodness. I mean, I think for me, the thing that's most important is just be authentic. You know, be real, know yourself, be self-aware, and then just be willing to be brave. I'm a big believer that at the core, every person wants to be known. And if you go into a conversation vulnerable and willing to be authentic, more times than not, your audience will meet you there, and they too will be vulnerable and authentic. And that's where true cultivating relationships happen.
Love that. Thank you. Hope?
Yeah, second what Christen said, and I think that's the only way that you can go about this and actually turn it into something meaningful and powerful. But for me too, it's all about finding this space. I actually recently wrote a little mission statement to myself on what that means to me. And at the end of the day, it's pouring into people. That's what's most important to me. I mean, the impact that you can make on folks' lives, even in a small day-to-day interaction or networking or other events. And so passion and purpose, that's what I'll leave you
Pouring
with.
into others. I love that. Well, thank you both, Hope and Christen, for your time. And thanks to everyone who was able to join us today. We really appreciate you giving us your hour. As we wrap up, just a couple things. We'd love to hear your feedback on today's session. We always love new ideas and new topics. We want to make this relevant and meaningful to you. So if you can, give this a quick scan, and we'd love to hear your feedback. We also would love you to be a donor. We've got a great gifting program. I'm going to do a quick plug. It's on our website. You know, are you searching for that gift that for someone that's hard to buy, or maybe a colleague in the industry that, you know, maybe you get a bottle of wine or a fruitcake or some little gift? What an awesome way to show your support by donating to Wi-Fi in their honor this year. It can be a small gift, but check that out on our website. We'd love to see you participate in that. And that directly sponsors our scholarship programs. All of our speakers and everything donate their time to us, so that money goes directly back into the Wi-Fi group to support our mission. Check us out on social if you're not already. I'll show you the social handles in a moment, but here's a lot of our postings, keeping you updated with what's going on. We're on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and we're also womeninflooring.org. So please save that and stay in touch with us. And that brings us to the end. So another big thank you to Hope and Christen. Special thanks to Andrea, Maggie, and the team who also helps put all these together and gives us their time. Much appreciated. So hope everybody has a great day. And thank you again for joining us. We'll see you next time.